name is Celeste LaCabra. Welcome back to my channel. I know that this is a bit late, about a week late, but I wanted to still go ahead and do my Letterboxd recap for the month. Hopefully you'll still enjoy it. I like to do these every month to kind of, you know, give a nightcap of sorts to the exorbitant amount of film watching I do in a month. So this month was quite a bit lighter than my months usually are, and I talked about quite a few of these in depth in videos already, so for the most part I'm probably just going to refer you to those, but I'll still touch briefly on them if you weren't able to check out those videos. So for August I logged 49 entries, as you can see. That includes short films and documentaries, but it's mostly feature-length narrative films. If I say that I rented something during the month, that means I rented it from 3dbluRayRental.com. I will have their information linked below if you want to know how you can rent boutique Blu-rays and 4Ks for yourself. They're not affiliated with my channel, I just think they're great. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started from the bottom. Okay, so starting off, I watched 2 Vinegar Syndrome titles. I discussed these really in depth on my Vinegar Syndrome wrap-up video for August, so please go ahead and check that out if you want to know my further thoughts on this. But for Shriek of the Mutilated, this is a pretty silly but still pretty fun kind of Bigfoot Yeti film. Ultra low budget, really cheesy, campy stuff. If that sounds like your jam, I'd say check it out. Kiss Me Monster was part 2 of the Jess Franco double feature that they put out, and I fucking hated it. So sorry to Jess Franco fans out there, but I couldn't stand this. If it's something that might be more for you, then great, but it wasn't for me. This next whole section here actually was all for a Cinema Sepulchre video, so definitely check that one out for a more in-depth look at these titles. But Mad Dog Morgan was a really powerful, grim Ozploitation film. The accompanying documentary, To Shoot a Mad Dog, was pretty good too. Corruption was this really sort of grim 1970s kind of fucked up Eyes Without a Face meets Hammer's Frankenstein, Peter Cushing starring sci-fi horror sort of deal. It was a lot of fun and actually pretty good. And then Scum is one of my absolute favorite watches of the month for sure. Just a completely brutal, mesmerizing, sort of incredibly depressing adolescent prison drama. It's a tough watch and it'll probably ruin your day, but it's really amazing and I highly recommend checking it out. Next on the Criterion channel, I watched The Setup. This, I believe, is a Robert Wise film, and it's part of the boxing bundle that they have going on right now. It's a really quick watch. I think it's like under 80 minutes, like closer to 70, something like that. As you can see from my rating, I thought it was really great. Next, from Vinegar Syndrome, Righting Wrongs. This is a really great kind of martial arts Hong Kong film. It's really zany and wild, and the Vinegar Syndrome edition has all sorts of extras to dive into and 3 cuts of the film. Again, I covered that in my video if you want to hear more about it, but I definitely recommend that one. Next on Hulu, I watched Prey, the new Predator film. I have kind of mixed feelings about this one. I do really enjoy it. I don't like it as much as Predator 2, and I definitely don't like it as much as the original Predator, but it sure as shit is better than Predators and The Predator, which Predators is not that bad. It's pretty bad, but The Predator is one of the most awful, offensive films I've ever seen in my life. So we could really only go up from here, but or really could only go up from there, but I didn't think this was as amazing as a lot of people were making it out to be. Some of the CG sequences are really bad, and some of the practical effects are really great. And some of the sequences that blend the two are really effective, but overall it's very good. It's just kind of cheesy, and I really, really, really don't like that it's in English. I know that there is a cut of the film in the native language. I really apologize, but the language name is escaping me. And if I ever watch it again, I'm definitely watching that one. I kind of skipped around a bit once I found out that it existed after the film was done, And the dubbing seems to be done pretty well. Like, it doesn't look super obvious, and all the actors are doing the same voices, so it's dubbing done right, but in my opinion, it should have been shot that way and then dubbed over in English for the normies who can't watch a film in non-English languages. So that was annoying, but shout out the dog. One of the best dog performances of the year for sure. Hopefully they win the Pup D'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. Maybe? I don't know. We'll see. Um, Next, I watched this for International Cat Day. This is the very first, I guess, cat video in history. It's just kind of a 1 second actuality of a cat falling. I think it was made to kind of test the theory that cats always land on their feet, and it's really cute, and it's historical for cat people such as myself, so there's that. Next, obviously I didn't watch this all in one day, but we finished Twin Peaks: The Return on this day, and I think it was absolutely perfect. It's such an amazing finale to such an amazing series. Just a perfect culmination of 25 years plus of world building and incredible writing and performances. The actors who do return do such a great job, and the ones who can't return were sorely missed. And there's one or two actors that chose not to return that are disappointing to me, but that's not really, in David Lynch's control or anything like that. Kyle MacLachlan is just so wonderful in this. Speaking of which, he just did a Criterion Closet video today, which was a lot of fun, so I highly recommend you check that out. But there's nothing I can say to kind of express what this means to me and how amazing it is and how beautiful it is in like a quick recap like this, but Maggie Mayfish did an incredible 2-part retrospective analyzing Twin Peaks, and there are quite a few reviews on the Letterboxd page for this that are just stunning and some of the most insightful pieces of film writing I think I've ever read. So yeah, that's Twin Peaks: The Return. We watched that on our Blu-ray set, by the way, and if you don't have that one and you're interested in Twin Peaks or you want to rewatch Twin Peaks, just buy it. Just buy the complete series Blu-ray. It is astounding. Paramount really knocked it out of the park on that one, and I'm so happy that I have it in my collection. Mine actually has a slipcover, which is interesting because I received it, originally in just the plastic case, and it was completely busted to shit. So I returned it, and Amazon sent me another one with a slipcover on it. So that was a fun happenstance. I didn't even realize that, it would have one, but so you might get one. Next, the best of the martial arts films. I discussed this again in the Vinegar Syndrome video because this is a supplement to the Righting Wrongs release. It's a feature-length martial arts documentary, and it's kind of a highlight reel of just really kick-ass scenes from various martial arts films throughout history. And it just kind of has like some narration and explanations throughout. As a primer on the genre, I guess it's pretty decent, but it's just really fun to sit and watch this highlight reel of like badass choreography, So I recommend that one. Next, I watched my Second Sight edition of The Witch. Now, right now I have this as my third favorite film of all time, so I was very happy to go ahead and drop the $60 on the set. Plus, I was planning on doing an in-depth review on it, going through the whole set, going through all the special features, talking about the transfer, talking about the packaging, talking about the booklet, etc. But I'm now seeing that it's been almost a full month since I watched this, and I'm wondering if it even makes sense to do that review anymore. It's still on the docket, and I still want to do it, but I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you'd really like to see that, or if you think it's too late and nobody will care. But in any case, it is a absolutely perfect, incredible film. I don't know. I could do an in-depth review of the film itself as well, because I think thematically it has so much to say, and stylistically it achieves so much. So I'm just a huge fan of it, obviously, with it being in my top 4 and everything. But real quick, I will say that the Second Sight transfer, so I have the original 4K, the Lionsgate release as well, and I did an apples to apples comparison after watching it, and there's definitely a difference, but I think it's pretty subtle, and if you're not a super fan of this, or if you're not like a huge stickler for like watching a film in the director's vision like I am, you'll probably be fine sticking with the Lionsgate, you know. But if it's an all-timer for you, and if you really care about making sure that you see the director's most pure vision of their films, importing the second sight is pretty much essential because it's the only one that is supervised and approved by Robert Eggers. The packaging itself is really beautiful. I think it's worth it, but if it sells out or if you're not interested in dropping $60 on one film, I'm sure a standard edition is coming if it's not already out. So just be on the lookout for that. Overall, though, the color tones in this are a lot colder than they were on the Lionsgate release. I think the studio or whatever was like, this looks too bleak. There's not any color in this. Let's add a bit of warmth to it. And Robert Eggers was kind of like, no, it's supposed to be super cold and super bleak. Like, that's the point. So it's been corrected in that regard. Next, I rented Daimajin. That's the first disc in the Arrow video set. I've had my eye on that set for a while, and I'm really glad I rented it because, I mean, the last 20 minutes of this are incredible. It just completely fucking kick ass. There's especially one kill that had like made my jaw drop. It was so brutal and unexpected, but most of the film I think is really boring. Like, it actually has a lot of things to say thematically in terms of oppression and authoritarianism and not quite colonization because they're not being occupied by some kind of foreign entity, but you know, the people that take over essentially do it against their will and subjugate them. So it kind of has something, it's kind of along those lines. So even though the themes are really interesting, the visuals were really creative, and the ending sequence was so kick-ass, I was so bored for the majority of this film, and maybe the other two are better, but I probably won't be getting this set. Kim Newman gives a really good interview about it, so check that out if you have the disc. Next on HBO Max, we watched Airheads. I watched this because I've been hearing about it for so long. Like, it's like a metal movie, you know, and it's famous for not having a Blu-ray, so it's either DVD or watch it on HBO Max, which I think is really the only way to see it in HD. Maybe you can rent it or buy it somewhere digitally, but in any case, it was leaving this month, so I wanted to go ahead and check it out to see if it's even worth clamoring for a Blu-ray or whatever, you know, or if it's worth grabbing a DVD, whatever, you know. And I thought it was okay. It was pretty hokey. It was pretty cheesy. It was a little much, but overall I thought it was fun, and I thought it was fairly charming, and I really like the performances, especially Brendan Fraser. He looks like hot in this, which I've never found Brendan Fraser attractive, not in the Mummy movies, not in anything else I've seen him in, but you know, with the flowing long hair, he's got it going on. Adam Sandler is ridiculous and pretty fun, I guess. And I like Steve Buscemi's really off-the-wall performance in this too. One thing that I liked about it, especially, is just how many band stickers and photos and posters are all over the place in this. There's some real deep cuts too, so it's fun to kind of pause and point it out if you're, you know, kind of a music junkie like I am. Next, I went through and watched all the short films included on the Wendy and Lucy disc from Oscilloscope. This first one was called Boston Fire. It was just kind of a short, like, experimental, almost like an actuality of this fire that essentially happened in Boston. And it's like, the color contrast is just super, super stark. Like, the blacks are pitch black, and it just looks really striking. But there's not much to it past that. It's certainly an interesting document of sorts. And then from the same director is called New York Portrait Chapter 2. Chapter 1 was not included, and I didn't look it up, so I haven't seen it, but I don't think you need to see that to see this, because again, it's sort of the same thing. It's like borderline actuality, kind of just documentary as documentation, just straight up, you know what I mean? I'm struggling to remember a lot about this, to be honest. I just remember just kind of a series of images that were just presented without context. Again, it looked nice, but that's kind of about it. Next was the Scary Movie. This was kind of a like experimental, absurdist horror kind of oddity, I guess. It's very strange. It was kind of about these two girls at a sleepover, like making their own horror film. It's just kind of bizarre imagery through and through, without a lot of context, and it was fun, you know. This one I kind of enjoyed. This was called Flight. It's literally just like a 5 to 10 second maybe clip of one of the astronauts on the very first moon landing, like bouncing about. And the director essentially took every single frame of this and created almost like a remix of it. It looked like it took forever to do, and I found it kind of hypnotic and soothing and intriguing and unique, and I don't know, I really enjoyed it. You kind of have to see it to understand what I'm talking about, but I don't know, it's almost like YouTube poop or something before that was even a thought in somebody's brain, you know? Yeah, just kind of an interesting experiment in what can be done with the medium and with editing in general, so I enjoyed it. This one was interesting. This was called How to Fix the World. On the disc it has a question mark at the end in the title, but I didn't see that anywhere else. I wonder if that was a typo of sorts. So essentially this director took existing research audio tapes and created her own animations to accompany them, kind of, you know, chopped them together to kind of create a narrative, and, you know, supplied it with her own kind of weird experimental animations. Essentially, the interviews are of Islamic farmers living on the outskirts of the Soviet Union, and kind of learning to read and write under this new kind of socialist regime. It just kind of, it's just somebody talking to them, asking them about their experiences, about their thoughts. It's an intriguing document in and of itself, but the way that she presents it and chops it up and adds the animation to it makes it a really kind of wholly unique sort of experience, and one that I really enjoyed and am glad to have had on the disc. Next, I finally finished up the Jaws supplements with this documentary, The Shark is Still Working. This was kind of a fan-made documentary. It's nowhere near as good as the official making of documentary, but it is interesting in its kind of fan-made aspects and in its ability to present itself as a retrospective as opposed to kind of a more contemporary take. Although, you know what, the making of was created a fair amount of time afterwards as well, but, you know, you got even more time, I guess, to process the impact. So, I don't know. I found it to be largely redundant, as you see from my score. I thought it was okay. I think my favorite tidbit in this was the author of the Jaws novel, how he talked about how he's now dedicated his life to, like, shark activism. Like, he recognizes his impact as a person who kind of gave sharks a really bad name, and now he works to sort of correct those misconceptions as like the authority on the fact that that's not really true. You know what I mean? Like, people listen to him when he says that sharks aren't dangerous, or at least not as dangerous as he made it out to be. Next was the start of a kind of a Billy Wilder binge that I did, or maybe it started earlier, I don't know. But in any case, Witness for the Prosecution. This one stars Marlene Dietrich, kind of. She's not as in it as much as I thought she would be or hoped she would be, but this is just a really excellent kind of legal drama. Just the lead lawyer in this is so funny and so good, and the twists and turns in it are just batshit insane. And at a certain point, it had lost me, and I was like, that's kind of lame. But then at the end, it brought me back again, and I was like, all right, that was tight. So I highly recommend this. Heavy Trip I talked about in Cinema Sepulchre, so we're going to pass on that. But it's a really fun, kind of charming heavy metal comedy, or extreme metal comedy, actually. Next, on the Criterion channel, I watched Daisies to prepare for my conversation with James at 20th and 21st Movies. I described it to him and to his chat as if Jean-Luc Godard had directed Hausu, and I stand by that. That's pretty much what it's like. It's this really great kind of anarchic feminist farce, bordering on plotless, but definitely not short on joy and wonder. It's just great. I loved it. Next on the Criterion Channel, I watched the original adaptation of Silence. This is the Japanese one. I've been fascinated with this story for some time. I have a lot of mixed feelings about it, like as an ex-Catholic and as a leftist who generally doesn't care for religion or Catholicism specifically, or colonialism, which this story kind of has and endorses in spades. But it's also kind of a statement on like the power of conviction, the dangers of repression, religious liberty, like fighting for that, championing for that in general. The way it arrives at it is definitely messy and problematic, but it's still just a fascinating story. And I've read the novel, I watched Scorsese's take on it, and now I've watched this one. So I feel like I know this story pretty well. But this wasn't quite as good as Scorsese's take on it, but I thought it was still really great and really well made. So it's on the permanent collection on the Criterion Channel, so check it out when you get a chance. Next on the Criterion Channel again, Orson Welles' Touch of Evil. Another Marlene Dietrich. I'm trying to catch up on her essential films. I kind of took a break from reading the biography about her, and I figured I should probably catch up on some essentials, so those don't get spoiled for me in the book. In any case, I thought this was really great. It's just so fucking dark, and it's just a really great critique on policing in general, and racism. It's a great film. Now, I know that there's like 3 different cuts of it, and I think I watched the theatrical. I think that's the one that was on the channel, but so definitely I need to get the Kino Lorber 4K and check out the longer cut of it. Morven Caller and Pals I discussed in an episode of Cinema Sepulchre, so we're going to move past them, but they were both great. Then we watched Tickled on HBO Max, which was about as batshit insane as you've heard. Try to go into this blind, I mean, or don't if you don't care, but it's fun to just kind of let it reveal itself to you as it just gets more and more batshit and nonsensical. The follow-up short film, The Tickle King, is almost as fascinating, but not quite as good, you know what I mean? It's just kind of talks about the fallout and has some really insane footage of some of the film festival premieres. I can't really talk about it without spoiling Tickled, so I won't. But I will say that this whole saga has a very unsatisfying ending, and it took me a lot of online digging to kind of, I guess, be satisfied with the threads that it opens, and feel like things were addressed, I guess. So the directors wrote an article for a Canadian newspaper, so try and find that if you're like me and you finished it and you were like, that's it. You know, so do that. Next, this was a Marlene Dietrich and a Billy Wilder film, so 2 in 1. It was called A Foreign Affair. It was a pretty fun kind of like romantic comedy slash, not really a war film, but a wartime film, I guess, where Marlene Dietrich plays a Nazi, which is really strange considering how far she went to disassociate that. Like, not that she was ever a Nazi, but, you know, she was from Germany and was expected to toe the line, and she really, really went hard in terms of being anti-Nazi and anti-fascist. So it's interesting that she would take this role. But I guess it is ambiguous as to the validity of her beliefs in the film. But in any case, I really enjoyed it. Check it out. Next, Crimson Peak. I talked about that in Cinema Sepulchre. I loved it. Tom and Jerry the movie. This was leaving HBO Max. I was a huge, huge Tom and Jerry fan as a really young child, and I couldn't remember if I'd seen this or not, so I wanted to check it out. It was okay. I wasn't really a fan of them talking too much, but the villains in this are so absolutely ridiculous and absurd, I kind of love them. So, mixed bag, but I enjoyed it. This one might be controversial. I watched Hard to Be a God, the Russian film. Now, there's a lot I love about this, and there's a lot I admire about it. But at the end of the day, I hated it. I hated watching it, and I'm never watching it again. So the cinematography and the set design is actually really beautiful. Like, it is truly an achievement in filmmaking, and it looks great. Unfortunately, this touches upon, I don't know if you all are like this, but I think everybody has like one thing that really, really grosses them out to the point where they can't handle it, and they can't see it or hear about it. It's just get it away from me. I don't want to know anything about it. Like, it actually hurts my brain. You know what I mean? And this has that for me, which is people just blowing their noses into their own face and on other people and just shooting it out into the air and on the just constantly, constantly, constantly. And if that wasn't bad enough, they are just also constantly covered in dirt and in shit and in grime and spit. It is the nastiest film I've ever seen in my life. I put it on by myself for about 30 or 40 minutes, maybe? No, 20 minutes. I only made it 20 minutes and I was like, I can't do this. I gotta revisit this later because this is horrible. And then I watched it again with Avery. I was like, hey, I need some moral support for this shit. Like, I need to see if I can get through it at all, you know? She didn't really like it either, but not because she was super grossed out, just she thought it was kind of boring and didn't go anywhere. And I kind of agree, honestly. Like, I think the concept is really fascinating, and I think the themes it deals with are really interesting, but it's a problem if I can't look at your film for longer than a second without having to avert my eyes and just be viscerally disgusted and horrified. So I couldn't stand it, but don't let that deter you from seeking it out if it sounds like something you can handle, because it is a really interesting and ambitious achievement. Next, we watched the first two original Beavis and Butthead shorts, which were fairly amusing. They were interesting, especially this one, Frog Baseball, to kind of see the original attempt at the voices, because they're very different. But yeah, I enjoyed both of them. Next, from Billy Wilder, The 7-Year Itch, starring Marilyn Monroe. I wrote a short little review on this. It was okay. Like, there was parts I liked about it, and I wanted to like it, but the main character was so absolutely, completely insufferable. It never let up. Like, he was constantly narrating every single thought he had, and it just never ended. It also has this kind of really annoying, like, oh, men, you know how they are. Like, oh, they're just horn dogs all the time. They see a pretty lady, and it's like a fucking, I don't know. Like, it has very kind of antiquated and heteronormative ideas of gender and sexuality that I tend to find annoying if they're not being properly satirized, and I didn't feel like they were here. So it's a rare L from Billy Dub, but what are you going to do? Next was Haxan, which I discussed in Cinema Sepulchre, but it's fucking incredible, and you should go watch it. From 3D Blu-ray, I should say I rented the 7-Year Itch as well, but from 3D Blu-ray I rented the Fortune Cookie. They had the old Twilight Time edition of it, which was nice. This stars Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, and it's kind of a, like, not really a legal comedy, but like, I don't know, it stars a lawyer. Walter Matthau is like a shady lawyer, and Jack Lemmon is like a sports reporter who gets injured, and it's just kind of a fun satire on like legal frivolity in the United States, how cynical people abuse systems for money. And it's also a romance on top of that. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really charming and fun, and yeah, I liked it a lot. So it was nice to get another great one from old Billy Dub in the watch in the diary. Then I watched this other version of Haxan, and I watched A Snake of June from Shinya Tsukamoto, and then I rewatched it with a commentary. Discussed all of this in Cinema Sepulchre, so please go check that out. But Snake of June is great, and this version of Haxan is kind of pointless, but it's there. Next, I watched the original Criterion edition of Nightmare Alley, which I thought was really great. But I'm slated to talk about it this Friday on Cinema Sepulchre, so check that out when it arrives. Next, from Billy Wilder, I rented the Blu-ray of Irma la Douce. This one I had mixed feelings about. So I can't really talk about my problems with it without spoiling it, but for one thing, this film is entirely too long. It is like 2.5 hours when this should have been like a tight 100, maybe. You know, like let's call it 110. Like you can stretch it a little bit, but it just kind of kept going, and we kept adding new threads and adding zanier things and more plot elements that were completely ridiculous, and just at a certain point it loses any semblance of believability or sense at all. And that's okay if, like, because it really plays into it, especially by the end. It's kind of winking at the audience like, yeah, this is ridiculous. But I think that that's okay if it comes to a thematic purpose at the end. But by the end, the thing that really should have obviously happened the entire time never does. And I don't know if that's just because I'm looking at this with my modern progressive sensibilities or something, but really, I think for the time, this is even a little regressive in its politics regarding gender and relationships. And I just, again, I can't go into specifics without spoiling it, but the obvious thing that should happen never happens, and it's frustrating. So next, again on HBO Max, we watched the remake of Nightmare Alley, which I generally really enjoyed. My main problem with it is that, like, noir is kind of like the bread and butter of classic noir is moral ambiguity, right, and darkness, and like it takes those black and whites in its color palette and in its themes and kind of creates a gray. Which I think is really interesting and really fun, and kind of what makes noir stand out from like traditional Hollywood fare, where like a lot of it kind of had to have a kind of black and white moral by the end. And what Guillermo del Toro does with this is he stretches it out, which is fine, and he makes it really stylized and really creepy and really violent, which I'm all about. I like all that stuff. The casting, I think, is quite good overall, but that moral ambiguity is kind of gone. Like, I wonder if the studios like read the original script and were like, this is too ambiguous, like, or like this doesn't, the audience won't understand this, you need to make it more obvious. Because there are just so many scenes where characters are just kind of explaining the themes to you and explaining rather than foreshadowing things that are going to happen, and it's just like, I mean, I guess I had a leg up since I'd seen the original, but I think even people who hadn't are going to see story beats and hear monologues and be like, oh, this is what's going to happen, or like, this is the point of the story, or like, this is, you know, the moral arc of this character. It's just, it was disappointing. I'd like to watch the black and white version at some point because it actually is streaming on HBO Max and not put out on disc, unfortunately, so I'll have to check that out at some point, but yeah, I also didn't like Cate Blanchett's character. Like, especially comparing to the character in the original, it's just not even close. She's kind of just doing one thing the entire time and really, really stripping her character of any kind of nuance or, again, ambiguity. Like, it's just, those are the things I was disappointed with. But overall, it's a really kind of thrilling and visually stunning film, as Guillermo's films all are. So, not my favorite, but I did really like it. Next, I watched The Ant Bully because it's on my list of films I've seen but don't remember well enough to rate. I mean, it's not that good. You know, you don't need me to tell you that. Like, Nick Cage is in it, which is fun. And the kid who voices Avatar, The Last Airbender, is in it. Aang. Jesus Christ. Voices Avatar. The voice actor for Aang from Avatar, The Last Airbender is in it as well, which is fun. But it's just kind of stupid, and it's really kind of didactic in its themes. Like, it's really obvious what it's trying to do, and I don't know, it's okay. Or not really, it's not that good. Okay, next. I Do Not Care If We Go Down in History as Barbarians. This was incredible. I really loved this. It's a narrative film, kind of. It's like a mockumentary of sorts, I guess, because it's following a director who's doing a recreation of a genocide that occurred in Romania, or was at the hands of Romanians in World War II. And it took me a little bit before I realized that this was not the director of the film and that this is a character that she's playing. Um, and she essentially, yeah, so she wants to recreate this, but she comes up against a lot of opposition and pressure to tone down her message and whitewash the history. It's just this really great commentary on memory and history and how nations accept culpability and atrocity and how they morally justify and like brush that kind of stuff under the rug. I don't want to spoil it, but I watched this on the Criterion channel, but Big World Pictures has a Blu-ray of it that I will certainly be purchasing come the next Vinegar Syndrome sale. So definitely check it out. Buy the disc if you want to or if you can, because it's a great film. Next, from the same director, Atherim. I hope that's how you pronounce that. Anyway, it's kind of a Romanian historical period piece, I guess, about the enslavement of the Romani people. It kind of meanders for a bit. Like, it's definitely a bit experimental, and I could see how some people might be bored by it. But it really comes together in the end, and the ending is just really one of the most harrowing, disturbing scenes I think I've ever seen. I mean, I really just had to sit there for a minute. Like, it kind of took my breath away in a way, you know? Just really harsh stuff. But I really love the black and white cinematography here and the way that it kind of drains all the image of its beauty. It's not like a stylized black and white, it's like a sickly kind of pale black and white where you're looking at these beautiful like landscapes and stuff and it doesn't look beautiful, you know? I saw people complaining about that, but I think that's part of the point because I know that the director, in watching his interview on the Criterion channel, part of his mission statement is to stop romanticizing history or to stop pretending as though we can just watch history in these fictional period pieces. So it's kind of like a statement on the artificiality of the whole thing, or the whole enterprise of creating historical films like this. But it's an interesting look into a period of history that I think most people are not very informed on, so I highly recommend checking that out if you can. I don't think it's not on the Criterion channel anymore, and I don't really know where you can find it, but if you can, definitely give it a watch. And then finally, leaving the Criterion channel as well, Billy Wilder's The Lost Weekend. This is one of his classics, like one of the big blind spots for me. It won Best Picture, Best Director, the whole 9 yards, I think. I thought this was such a great, kind of brutal and uncompromising look at alcoholism. Yeah, I don't know, just the lead performer does such a great job in capturing the excuses and the hopelessness present in addiction. I don't know, I don't want to talk too much about it because I feel like I'm running out of time, but also because I want you to just experience it, and it's such a classic that I feel like most of you have already seen it. I won't talk about why in the last 20 minutes or so, but the last 20 minutes or so almost had me in tears. Like, it is such a harsh and uncompromising view of what happens, and even though the ending kind of, I don't know, I don't think it would have ended like that today. It doesn't feel earned necessarily, but again, this is a studio picture, so we were getting into some really dark territory that I don't know would have cut it back in the day, you know? But it's just so emotional and so beautifully done, and yeah, I highly recommend it. So that's it. Those are the 49 films I watched in this here month of August in the year of our Lord 2022. Thank you so much. We hit 100 subscribers on the channel. Onward to the next and the next. You know, we'll see how far we can take this thing. Please share this video with your nerdy ass friends. Liking a video helps me out a lot. Helps it get boosted in the almighty algorithm. Please leave me comments if you've seen any of these films, or if you want to ask me about any of these films, or if you just want to have a conversation down below. Let's do it. Yeah, there should be a Cinema Sepulchre video coming this week. I'll have a Corn Shucker review up this week, and we'll see what else I can scrounge together. That's it. Hail Cinema. Hail Celluloid. And hail Satan. Bye.